Hi everyone, Tracy DW here. To really understand Sudan's modern crisis, we need to ask the question, how does colonial influence account for Sudan's current problems? In order to find the answers, we have to trace them back to the colonial structures and policies that shaped and fractured the country before independence. Sudan's current conflicts, regional inequalities, identity struggles and cycles of authoritarianism and war are not just post-independent failures. They are in many ways the legacy of British Egyptian colonial rule. Firstly, the use of artificial borders and divided entities. The Anglo-Egyptian condominium drew arbitrary borders that grouped together vastly different peoples, Arabized Muslims in the north and African Christian or animist groups in the south, with little shared history or governance tradition. The British deliberately governed north and south separately. The north was administered through Arabic-speaking Muslim elites, and the south was isolated, indoctrinated by missionaries, and discouraged from Arabic or Islamic influence. When Britain left, Sudan was a single state without a shared national identity. The southern regions feared domination by the northern elite, which led almost immediately to civil war. This north-south divide eventually culminated in the succession of South Sudan in 2011. But the same pattern of marginalisation has continued in places like Darfur, the Blue Nile and South Kordofan. Secondly, uneven economic development. The British invested heavily in the Nile Valley, especially in the Jazeera scheme, a cotton project designed to feed British textile mills. The West, Darfur, East and South were neglected. No infrastructure, schools or hospitals. Economic policies served imperial interests, not local needs. And this policy resulted in Sudan becoming a producer of raw materials and an importer of finished goods. Regional inequalities therefore persisted and deepened after independence, and these disparities fueled resentment and rebellion, notably in Darfur, where locals demanded the same development benefits long concentrated in Khartoum, and today the struggle over resources and political power is still at the heart of Sudan's conflicts. Third, British and cultural hierarchies. British administrators promoted a racialised ideology that portrayed northern Arabized Muslims as civilised and southern Africans as primitive. This reinforced ethnic and religious hierarchies that survived independence. In the south, Christian missionary schools were allowed, creating different cultural and linguistic identities. Successive governments in Khartoum promoted Arab Islamic nationalism, marginalising non-Arab and non-Muslim groups. The imposition of Islamic law in the 1980s under Jafar Nimiri and later by Omar al-Bashir reignited north-south tensions. These divisions still echo in Sudan's ethnicised conflicts. Fourth, centralised authoritarian governance. The British ruled Sudan through a centralised, indirect rule system, empowering a small group of tribal chiefs and Arab elites to control vast rural populations. Power and wealth were concentrated in Khartoum, while the peripheries were politically excluded. As a result, post-independence leaders inherited and maintained this centralised authoritarian structure, and military coups from 1958 to 2021 became a pattern as power remained concentrated in the army and the cartoon elite. The current war between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces is, in part, a struggle within that same centralised system. Rival elites competing for control of the colonial core. Fifth, an economy built for extraction and not for integration. The economy was designed for resource extraction, such as cotton, gum, and livestock, with profits flowing to Britain. Infrastructure, such as railways and irrigation, connected resource zones to Port Sudan, not to each other, reinforcing this economic fragmentation. After independence, Sudan's economy remained dependent and unequal. The state relied on exporting a few commodities, leaving it vulnerable to shocks and corruption, and local grievances over land, water, and resources remain key drivers in the conflict. Number 6. Institutional weakness and elite continuity. The British left weak national institutions, minimal bureaucracy, no democratic culture, and little administrative capacity. Power was transferred to a small elite educated under the colonial system. Sudan never developed strong, accountable institutions, and politics became a competition among elite factions, often militarized and ethnically defined. The absence of inclusive governance allowed corruption, repression, and repeated coups. From Numeri to Bashir to the 2021 military junta. And lastly, the colonial mindset in Sudanese politics. Even decades after independence, Sudan's ruling classes often reproduced colonial attitudes, treating peripheral populations such as the Darfuris, Nuba and Southerners as subjects rather than citizens. This internal colonialism perpetuates the same patterns of extraction, neglect and violence established by the British. Sudan's colonial history may not fully explain today's wars, but it structured the inequalities, divisions and state weaknesses that every Sudanese government since 1956 has inherited. The British left a state without a nation and successive regimes, rather than dismantling that colonial legacy, often served to only deepen it. If you liked this podcast, then stay on this listening platform, click the subscribe button and check out my other episodes related to this one, such as the previous episode, Sudan, a global response to the conflict, and the first part called Sudan, the Forgotten Remembrance. And don't forget what I call the heart and soul of the Stories to be Told movement, my stories or poetic narratives, Caribbean Wind, Caribbean Rush, Nights at the Round Table, the Berlin Conference 1884, and Gone with the Wind, Macmillan's Speech for Change. These are all available on the website in paperback, on Amazon in Kindle format, and in ebook format at Apple Books and all other digital platforms. Also, the publication of the latest 4 titles. Now, if you want to find out more, just visit storiestobetold.com and check out the learning platforms for The Journey's End, Giving Back Hong Kong, Bite from the Big Apple, A Story for New York, Hope for Zimbabwe, Arise the Phoenix, and A Story for South Africa. and we're marking the start of Season 6 with a special shout out, of course, and a thank you to Vineet and the entire team at Million Podcasts. We are making an announcement that Stories to be Told, the podcast series, has been recognised as one of the top 10 British Empire podcasts on the web by the Million Podcast panel. And we are also being featured in their top 25 history teacher podcasts and top 60 history podcasts for students. Just check out the links in the show notes. And if you'd like to sign up to my email list, just visit the website where you can opt in and receive your free samples of my first 4 titles. And finally, remember that you can also send me an audio message on the SpeakPipe link, which is also in the show notes, so don't be a stranger. Feel free to like, follow and share us on social media when you visit the website. Just click onto whichever social media link you would like to follow us on. And, as always, it is a pleasure and a privilege to share my learning journey with you in this podcast series, and I encourage you to either begin or continue your own. History is a matter of fact or perspective. I'm Tracy DW and this is a Stories to be Told podcast. Stay safe, stay well, stay blessed. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next